The silence in that White House ceremony hall was deafening. 2,000 people holding their breath, cameras flashing like lightning. And there I was, standing at attention, watching the President of the United States approach me with something that would change everything. But just 18 months earlier, I was nothing, less than nothing. I was the family embarrassment, the disappointment, the sister who couldn't measure up. "You're a disgrace to this family, Sarah." Those words still echo in my mind every single day. My brother Marcus said them right in front of everyone at our cousin's wedding, 200 guests watching as he tore me apart piece by piece. His voice was cold, calculated, designed to humiliate. "Look at you, 25 years old, and what do you have to show for it? Dad built an empire. I'm following in his footsteps as a federal prosecutor. Even our baby sister Emily is already a doctor. And you?" He laughed that cruel laugh that made my stomach turn. "You're playing soldier in the National Guard like it's some weekend hobby." The wedding reception went completely silent. I could feel every eye on me, judging, pitying. My own family looking away in embarrassment. My mother's disappointed sigh cutting through me like a knife. My father's stone-cold expression that said everything without saying a word. "You couldn't even finish law school," Marcus continued, his voice getting louder, more vicious. "You dropped out to play G.I. Jane. Do you know how embarrassing it is to tell people what my sister does for a living? Oh, Sarah, she's figuring herself out." That night, I made a decision that would change the course of my entire life, but nobody knew it yet. Nobody could have imagined what I was really capable of. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and this is the story of how I went from being the family disgrace to receiving the highest honor a soldier can earn. This is the story of how one moment of devastating humiliation became the fuel for something extraordinary. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up as the middle child in the Mitchell family was like living in a pressure cooker. My father, Robert Mitchell, was a self-made millionaire who built his construction company from nothing. Our house wasn't just a home. It was a monument to achievement, with every wall covered in diplomas, awards, and newspaper clippings celebrating the family's endless string of successes. My mother, Catherine, was a prominent surgeon who ran her own medical practice. She was the kind of woman who performed life-saving surgery in the morning, gave a medical conference presentation at lunch, and still made it home in time to quiz us on our homework over dinner. Excellence wasn't just expected from her children, it was assumed. Marcus, my older brother by 3 years, was born to fulfill every parent's dream. Valedictorian at our elite private school, full scholarship to Harvard Law, youngest prosecutor ever hired by the district attorney's office. He had this way of walking into a room and immediately commanding respect, like success radiated from his pores. Emily, my younger sister by 4 years, was the family prodigy. She skipped 2 grades, graduated medical school at 23, and was already making headlines in pediatric surgery. She was brilliant in that effortless way that made other people feel stupid just by standing next to her. And then there was me, Sarah. The one who tried law school because it was expected, not because I felt any calling for it. The one who lasted exactly 1 semester before I couldn't take another day of sitting in those sterile classrooms, surrounded by future lawyers who spoke about legal precedents like they were discussing their favorite movies. The day I dropped out, my father didn't speak to me for 3 months. Not a word. He would look right through me at family dinners like I was invisible. My mother started introducing me to her colleagues as Sarah, who's exploring her options, which was her polite way of saying I was a disappointment. Marcus would roll his eyes whenever my name came up in conversation. Emily would quickly change the subject. But joining the National Guard? That felt different. That felt like coming home to myself for the first time in my life. The physical training was brutal. 6-mile runs at dawn, obstacle courses that left me scraped and bleeding, strength tests that pushed my body beyond what I thought was possible. But I thrived in ways that surprised everyone, including me. The discipline, the teamwork, the sense of serving something bigger than myself. It filled a hole inside me that I hadn't even realized was there. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to be someone else. I wasn't competing with my siblings' achievements or desperately trying to live up to impossible expectations. I was just me, and somehow, that was enough. Still, my family saw it as a phase, a rebellious detour before I'd eventually come to my senses and do something real with my life. The breaking point came at my cousin Jennifer's wedding. It was supposed to be a celebration, But it became the day my brother decided to systematically destroy my self-worth in front of everyone who mattered to me. The wedding was a magnificent affair. 500 guests at an exclusive country club. Flowers that probably cost more than most people's cars. We were seated at the family table, the prestigious table that announced to everyone we were the important relatives, the successful ones. Dad was holding court, telling stories about his latest business acquisition. Mom was graciously accepting congratulations on her recent research publication. Emily was getting swarmed with praise for her promotion. Marcus was basking in the attention from his latest high-profile conviction. And then, inevitably, the conversation turned to me. "So, Sarah," my Aunt Linda asked with that innocent smile, "what's new with you, sweetheart? We never hear much about what you're up to these days." The table went quiet in that particular way that happens when people are pretending to be casual while actually paying very close attention. I should have given some vague, deflecting answer. Instead, I made the fatal mistake of being honest. "Actually, I just got selected for advanced training," I said, trying to sound casual. "There's a possibility I might get deployed overseas with my unit." The silence that followed was deafening. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's practiced smile became strained. Marcus set down his champagne glass with deliberate precision. "Deployed?" he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Like, to an actual war zone?" "It's not confirmed yet," I said quickly. "It's just a possibility. They're looking for people with medical training, and you're kidding yourself if you think they'd send you anywhere important," Marcus interrupted. "The National Guard barely qualifies as real military service. It's basically summer camp for people who couldn't hack it in the real world." The conversation at nearby tables was starting to quiet down as people began to notice the tension. I could see curious faces turning our way, eager to witness whatever drama was unfolding. "Marcus," my mother said quietly, but there was no real reproach in her voice. "No, Mom. Someone needs to say it." He turned to face me fully, his courtroom training evident. "Sarah, you're 25 years old. When are you going to stop pretending and start living in reality?" That's when he said it. Those words that would echo in my mind every single day for the next 18 months. "You're a disgrace to this family." The words hit me like a physical blow. The wedding reception around us seemed to explode into whispered conversations and uncomfortable glances. People were staring now, no longer pretending to mind their own business. While Dad built an empire from nothing, while Mom saves lives every day, while Emily revolutionizes pediatric medicine, and while I put criminals behind bars, you're playing dress-up soldier like it's some kind of game. His voice was getting louder, more theatrical. "Do you know how embarrassing it is to tell people what my sister does for a living? Oh, Sarah? She's figuring herself out." Still, I sat there, frozen, feeling smaller and more worthless than I'd ever felt in my entire life. My own brother had just systematically destroyed me in front of 200 people, and nobody at that table said a single word in my defense. The worst part wasn't even the words themselves. It was the way he said them with such casual cruelty, like he'd been thinking these thoughts for years, and was finally relieved to get them off his chest. I excused myself, went to the bathroom, and cried for 20 minutes. When I came back, the conversation had moved on like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just been publicly eviscerated by my own family, but something had changed inside me. The humiliation burned, yes, but underneath it was something else, something harder, more determined. That night, I applied for every advanced training program available: combat medic certification, leadership development, special operations support. If my family thought I was just playing soldier, I was going to show them what this soldier was really made of. 6 weeks later, I got the call that would change everything. "Specialist Mitchell?" The voice on the phone was crisp, official. "This is Colonel Williams from Special Operations Command. I need you to report to Fort Bragg tomorrow morning for a classified briefing." My hands were shaking as I hung up the phone. Special Operations Command didn't call National Guard soldiers unless something big was happening. The briefing was unlike anything I'd experienced. The room was full of serious-faced officers, maps covered in red markers, and an atmosphere so tense you could cut it with a knife. "Ladies and gentlemen," Colonel Williams began, "what you're about to hear is classified at the highest levels. 3 weeks ago, we received intelligence about an imminent terrorist attack. The target is a children's hospital in Syria, where American doctors are volunteering. 87 civilians, including 12 American medical personnel, are currently trapped." My heart stopped. A children's hospital. Kids. This is not a standard military operation. the colonel continued. The location is in a hostile zone that conventional forces cannot access without causing an international incident. We need a small team, specialized, capable of operating independently in extreme conditions. He looked directly at me. Specialist Mitchell, your medical training and combat readiness scores have identified you as a candidate for this mission, but I need to be clear. This is voluntary, and it's dangerous. Very dangerous. I didn't hesitate. I'm in, sir. The next 2 weeks were the most intense of my life. Advanced combat training, medical emergency procedures, language immersion, tactical planning. I was part of a 6-person team, and I was the only National Guard soldier among elite Special Forces operators. There was Sergeant Rodriguez, our team leader, who had more combat experience than the rest of us combined. Corpsman Jenkins, a Navy medic who could perform surgery in a foxhole. Lieutenant Chen, a communications specialist. Specialist Morrison, a demolitions expert. And Staff Sergeant Williams, a sniper whose accuracy was almost supernatural. And then there was me, the National Guard soldier who 6 months earlier had been called a disgrace by her own brother. They tested me every single day. Physical endurance that pushed me beyond anything I thought possible. Medical scenarios where life and death decisions had to be made in seconds. Combat simulations that felt more real than reality. And somehow, I kept up. More than kept up. I excelled. The mission launch was classified so heavily that I couldn't tell anyone where I was going. As far as everyone knew, I was just going to extended training. My mother called the night before we deployed. "Sarah, honey, Marcus told me about some training you're doing. I hope you're being safe." I almost laughed. Safe. If she only knew. "I'm fine, Mom. I'll call you when I can." "Okay, sweetheart. Oh, and Marcus wanted me to tell you he's sorry about what he said at the wedding. He was just... You know how he is." No, he wasn't sorry. He meant every word. But soon, that wouldn't matter anymore. I can't tell you the exact details of the mission, national security and all that. But I can tell you this. What we accomplished in those 4 days changed me forever. The hospital was surrounded by hostile forces. The children, 37 of them, were trapped on the 3rd floor with no way out. The American medical team was running out of supplies, and the local military couldn't get close enough to mount a rescue. Our job was to get in, evacuate the civilians, and get out without starting World War III. It should have been impossible. On the 2nd day, everything went wrong. Our extraction point was compromised. Our communications were jammed. 2 of our team members were injured. We were pinned down in a building with 87 terrified civilians and no way out. That's when I had to make the hardest decision of my life. There was one way to get the children out safely, but it meant someone had to stay behind to create a diversion. Someone had to draw the hostile forces away from the evacuation route and hold them off long enough for everyone else to escape. "I'll do it," I told Sergeant Rodriguez. "Mitchell, that's a suicide mission." "No, it's not. I've studied the building schematics. There's a service tunnel in the basement that connects to the old sewer system. I can hold them off for 20 minutes, then use the tunnel to escape." He looked at me for a long moment. "You sure about this, soldier?" I thought about Marcus calling me a disgrace. I thought about my family's disappointed faces. I thought about every time I'd felt like I wasn't good enough, smart enough, important enough. I'm sure. What happened next was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I held that position while 87 people, including 37 children, escaped to safety. I used every piece of training, every instinct, every ounce of determination I had. And somehow, miraculously, I made it out too. When we returned to base, I thought that was the end of it. We'd saved lives, completed an impossible mission, and I'd proven to myself that I was capable of more than anyone had ever imagined. But apparently, someone had been watching. 3 months later, I got another call. This time, it was from the Pentagon. "Specialist Mitchell, this is General Morrison. I need you in Washington. Today." The meeting was surreal. A room full of generals, admirals, and people in suits who didn't introduce themselves. They asked me about the mission, about my decisions, about my training. "Specialist Mitchell," General Morrison said finally, "what you did in Syria was extraordinary. Your quick thinking and selfless action saved 87 lives, including 12 American citizens. Your commanding officers report that your performance under extreme pressure was exemplary. I felt a warmth spreading through my chest. "Thank you, sir. I was just doing my job." "No," he said firmly. "You were doing much more than your job, which is why I'm recommending you for the Medal of Honor." The room started spinning. The Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration, given to fewer than 3,500 people in American history. "Sir, I don't understand." "Specialist Mitchell, you risked your life to save others with complete disregard for your own safety. You demonstrated extraordinary heroism in the face of enemy action. That's exactly what this medal represents." The next 6 months were a blur of interviews, investigations, and preparations. The Medal of Honor isn't given lightly. Every detail of my actions was scrutinized, verified, and confirmed by multiple sources, and through it all, I didn't tell my family. I couldn't. The medal ceremony was classified until the last minute, and even then, I wasn't sure I wanted them there. But 2 weeks before the ceremony, I made a decision that surprised even me. I called Marcus. "Hey, it's Sarah. I wanted to invite you to something. Can you and the family come to Washington next Friday? There's something happening that I think you should see." "Washington? Sarah, what's this about?" "I can't explain over the phone. Just trust me. It's important." He was quiet for a long moment. "Okay, we'll be there." The day of the ceremony, I was more nervous about seeing my family than I was about meeting the president. They arrived at the White House looking confused and slightly irritated. Marcus kept checking his watch. My mother kept asking what was going on. Emily looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Sarah," my father said when he saw me in my dress uniform, "what is all this?" "You'll see, Dad. Just, please, trust me." The ceremony hall was magnificent. Hundreds of military personnel, government officials, and dignitaries filled the room. My family was seated in the front row, looking increasingly bewildered. I stood at attention with the other honorees. There were 3 of us that day, waiting for the ceremony to begin. The president entered to a standing ovation. I'd met him briefly before the ceremony, but seeing him walk to the podium still felt surreal. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "today we honor 3 extraordinary Americans who exemplify the very best of our military and our nation." I could see my family in the front row, starting to understand that something significant was happening. Marcus was sitting up straighter. My mother had her hand over her mouth. Emily was staring at me with wide eyes. "The Medal of Honor is our nation's highest military decoration," the president continued. "It's awarded for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty. Today, we honor 3 soldiers who embody the courage, selflessness, and heroism that define the American spirit." My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might explode. "Our first honoree is Specialist Sarah Mitchell of the National Guard." The words washed over me as the president began reading my citation. Words like extraordinary heroism, selfless sacrifice, and saved 87 lives, including 37 children. I could see my family's faces changing as they realized what was happening. My mother was crying. My father's mouth was hanging open. Emily looked stunned. And Marcus looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Specialist Mitchell demonstrated remarkable courage under fire, using her medical training and tactical expertise to coordinate the safe evacuation of civilians while single-handedly holding off enemy forces. Her actions directly resulted in saving dozens of lives, including 12 American citizens. The president gestured for me to step forward. This was it, the moment I'd been dreaming about and dreading in equal measure. I walked across that stage with every eye in the room on me, cameras flashing, the weight of history and honor and redemption all focused on this single moment. The president smiled as I approached. "Specialist Mitchell, it's an honor to meet a true American hero." "Thank you, Mr. President. The honor is mine." He lifted the medal, that beautiful, heavy piece of bronze and ribbon that represented everything I'd fought for, everything I'd proven. "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty," he said, placing the medal around my neck. The Medal of Honor. The room erupted in applause, a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever, but all I could see was my family in the front row. My mother was sobbing with pride. My father was clapping with tears streaming down his face. Emily was beaming like I'd never seen her beam before. And Marcus was crying, really crying. The brother who had called me a disgrace 18 months earlier was crying with what looked like shame and pride and regret all mixed together. After the ceremony, my family surrounded me. Everyone was talking at once, congratulating me, asking questions, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. But Marcus pulled me aside. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to say." I looked at my brother, the golden child, the successful prosecutor, the one who had always made me feel small, and I saw something I'd never seen before: humility, respect, and deep, genuine remorse. "You don't have to say anything, Marcus." "Yes, I do." He took a shaky breath. "What I said at Jennifer's wedding, calling you a disgrace. I was wrong. I was so wrong I don't even know how to begin apologizing." I felt a 1.5 years of anger and hurt and determination all colliding in my chest. "You know what, Marcus? You calling me a disgrace was the best thing that ever happened to me." He looked confused, because it made me realize that I didn't need your approval. I didn't need Mom and Dad's approval. I didn't need to measure myself against your achievements or Emily's achievements. I just needed to be the best version of myself. The tears in his eyes were flowing freely now. "I am so proud of you," he whispered, "and I am so sorry." I hugged my brother for the first time in years, really hugged him. "I forgive you," I said, "but more importantly, I forgive myself for ever believing you were right." That evening, there was a reception at the White House. Military leaders, politicians, dignitaries, all the most important people in Washington were there. And in the middle of it all was me, a former law school dropout who had been called a disgrace by her own family. My mother couldn't stop introducing me to people. "This is my daughter Sarah, the Medal of Honor recipient." My father kept pulling out his phone to show pictures of the ceremony. Emily was posting photos on social media with captions like, "My hero sister," and Marcus. Marcus stayed close to me all evening, like he was afraid I might disappear if he let me out of his sight. "You know," he said as we stood on the White House balcony, looking out over the city, "I spent my whole life thinking success meant status and money and recognition. And now I realize that real success means having the courage to do what's right, even when no one's watching, even when everyone thinks you're making a mistake." He turned to look at me. "You've always had that courage, Sarah. Even when we were kids. I was just too blind to see it." I thought about all those years of feeling inadequate, all those family dinners where I felt like the disappointment, all those moments when I wondered if I'd ever be good enough. "You know what's funny?" I said. "For years, I thought you all saw me as a failure. But the truth is, I was the only one who had the courage to follow my own path instead of the path that was expected of me." "You're right," he said quietly, "and I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." 6 months later, I was promoted to sergeant and transferred to a position training other soldiers. My job now is to help other people discover what they're capable of when they stop letting other people's expectations define them. My relationship with my family has completely transformed. My parents now brag about their daughter, the war hero, to anyone who will listen. Emily calls me for advice about dealing with pressure and expectations. And Marcus and I talk every week now. He's become one of my biggest supporters and closest friends. But the most important change isn't how they see me. It's how I see myself. I'm not the family disgrace anymore. I'm not the disappointment who couldn't live up to impossible standards. I'm Sergeant Sarah Mitchell, Medal of Honor recipient, and I earned every bit of recognition and respect I have. The medal sits on my mantle now, but it's not the weight of the bronze that matters. It's the weight of knowing that I proved everyone wrong, including myself. Sometimes people ask me what I learned from that experience. What I tell them is this: the people who doubt you the most are often the people who need you to fail so they can feel better about their own choices. Your family, your friends, even yourself. Sometimes they'll try to keep you small because your growth threatens their comfort. But you don't need their permission to be extraordinary. You don't need their approval to chase your dreams. You don't need their validation to know your worth. All you need is the courage to prove them wrong. My brother called me a disgrace in front of 200 people at a wedding. 18 months later, the President of the United States called me a hero in front of the entire nation. The difference wasn't what other people thought of me. The difference was what I thought of myself. And that, more than any medal, is what real victory looks like. You know, 3 years have passed since that day at the White House, and I still get messages from people who heard my story. Messages from young women who feel like failures in their families. Messages from soldiers who think they're not brave enough. Messages from people who've been called names, written off, counted out. And every single time I read one of those messages, I think about that moment when Marcus called me a disgrace. How that one cruel sentence could have destroyed me. How it almost did. But instead, it became the spark that lit a fire I didn't even know I had inside me. The truth is, most of us walk around carrying someone else's opinion of who we're supposed to be. We let other people's fears and limitations become our own. We accept their version of our story instead of writing our own. I was lucky. I had that moment of clarity, that burning humiliation that forced me to choose. Stay small and prove them right, or fight back and prove them wrong. But here's what I wish someone had told me back then. You don't have to wait for rock bottom to start climbing. You don't need someone to call you a disgrace to discover your own strength. You don't need permission from anyone to become extraordinary. If my story touched something inside you, if it made you think about your own dreams that you've been putting off, or your own potential that others have dismissed, then maybe you're ready for your own transformation. Maybe you're ready to stop living someone else's small vision of your life. I share these stories because I believe in the power of one person's journey to change another person's path. I believe that sometimes, hearing how someone else overcame the impossible can give you the courage to attempt your own impossible. The thing is, I know most people will listen to this story and move on with their day. They'll feel inspired for a moment, maybe even tear up a little, but then life takes over and the feeling fades. That's human nature, and I understand it. But if you're someone who wants to hold on to this feeling, someone who wants to be reminded that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, then I need just one small favor from you. It's free, it takes 2 seconds, and it's the only way these stories reach the people who need them most. Just hit that subscribe button. I know. Everyone asks for subscriptions these days. But here's the thing. Almost nobody actually does it. Out of everyone listening right now, maybe 1 or 2 people will actually subscribe. And that's exactly the problem. These stories of transformation, of people who were counted out and came back stronger, they get buried under cat videos and celebrity gossip because people forget to subscribe. The algorithms don't know to show these stories to the young woman who feels like a disappointment to her family, or the man who's been told he'll never amount to anything, or the person who's ready to give up on their dreams. So if my story meant something to you, if it reminded you that your current situation isn't your final destination, then please, subscribe. It's the only help I need, and it doesn't cost you anything, because somewhere out there is the next Sarah Mitchell. Somewhere out there is someone who needs to hear that being called a disgrace isn't the end of their story. It's just the beginning of their comeback. Help me find them. Your subscription isn't just a number. It's a vote for the belief that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. It's a signal to the universe that these stories matter. And who knows, maybe your story will be the next one that changes someone's life. Subscribe, and let's prove them wrong together.